everyone, welcome to the Paterson Museum's webinar today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, please add your questions to the chat. And also, if you have any links or things that you would like to share with us, please feel free to do so in the chat and we will mention them. We will answer anybody's questions at the end of the program. And before we get started on this webinar, we also just wanted to let everybody know that I will be giving a presentation on November 20th, also at 2 o'clock, called Pearl Mania, the Paterson Gem Rush of 1857. So if you're interested in the Paterson pearls, of which we have some on our in our collection that will soon be going back out on exhibit, you can come and tune into that on November 20th, and we will be sending out information on how to register for that Zoom shortly. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to let Jack introduce himself. Go ahead.
Hello and greetings from Paterson, New Jersey. I hope wherever you are, you're having a great day and doing well. As Heather said, I'm the director of the museum. I actually became the director in the spring of 1989. And within a year of that period is when a long-term friendship started with, I'd say, Paterson's famous pharmacist, Frank Pinchak, which of course, he wasn't famous to me when I first met him because my first pharmacist was a John Gross on 21st Ave. But we did know the importance of the pharmacy because even as a child, if you were sick, normally the first line of defense, you went to the pharmacist first for some kind of concoction that he would brew to make you feel well. And then if that didn't work, you went to the doctors. So over the years, we've had exhibits and lectures with Frank. And so I figured, let's do a shot and honor someone that many people have known. And, I think I actually learned more about him getting ready for this presentation than when I actually sat with him for hours. So I'm going to get my PowerPoint that I just made for this show. Bring it up. Okay. I think his real tagline really was, safe storing saves lives. And this really is the life and times of Frank Pinchak, at least according to Giacomo DeStefano. It's not moving, Heather. Now it's moving. I have to say, where I think it all began, for most of us, how many of you have been frustrated from time to time trying to open up a medicine bottle? This famous where you got to push and turn, some of them are squeezed. Really, I always thought this was always around, again, we know it's an inconvenience, but it was to, keep medicine safe from children. Of course, I grew up in this, and as you can see, this really actually began in the late 60s by a Canadian doctor. He was the one who really came up with the bottle caps that we still use today. And it's pretty commonplace, I have to say, to see, store medicine safely. And we are quite used to them being everywhere. And actually, it was in 1970 where more of this advertising and more importantly, the packaging to keep children safe from, medicines that could poison them and obviously result in death at the worst, really became center stage. But where did it all begin? I thought this was something that was around for quite some time. And really, we find our beginnings go back to 1954. And it was under the two unfortunate incidents that were reported in the Paterson Evening News. In September of 1954, a young child, 21 months old, had ingested a bottle of oil of wintergreen and tragically passed away. And less than 6 weeks later, in October, an infant in Paterson had ingested a whole bottle, over 300 grams of aspirin, and again, passed away. And our Passaic County Pharmaceutical Association had the idea to come up with a poster and to start a publicity program. But the real genius behind this was Mr. Frank Pinchak, who had only recently been installed as the president of the Passaic County Pharmaceutical Association. He worked up the taglines in the sketch, and from what I recall, he said it was an artist from Ridgewood that would actually do some of the artwork for him. And this started in 54 with, again, save your child, keep medicines, out of reach. And again, safe storing saves lives. And this was so important, and it really went coast to coast. Initially, they only had printed a couple hundred of those posters, but his taglines, as you can see, we highlighted in yellow. This is from, Monmouth and Ocean County. Okay, you're still in New Jersey. But New York, Indiana, it really went across the country. It was like wildfire, and no one had done this before. And, again, just the farsightedness of Frank, pointing out the obvious. We need to keep medicine safe and from children. And again, what spurred this on, unfortunately, is that, children would ingest things that they shouldn't. But I thought, what inspired Frank to do this? I wanted to know a little bit more about Frank. So let's look at his life. Frank was born in 1922, which was really a pivotal time in Paterson history. It's really, our industries are changing. We're still in an industrial powerhouse. We were still known as the Silk City, but prior to World War One, it had really crested. Our locomotive industry was going to be around for a couple of more years, and what would become the next major industry around the same time, with the Wrights Aeronautical Corporation. So this is going to be the big employer. So, the depression may be starting and going on through 33, but Patterson still has some industries going down while new ones are coming up. Our population at the time is 136 and growing, 136,000. So, we were then and still are the third largest city in New Jersey. Frank used to always love to say that he was born in the back of the pharmacy. This is from 1915, and you can see on the bottom sketch there where it says SAL. It was a saloon originally. It was owned by John Post at one time before it would become Morris Pinchak Pharmacy. So I thought that was pretty interesting because it was already serving medicinal purposes in a way. And when you look on the left at the overall map, you can see there weren't a lot of buildings around in the south section of Paterson. It was right there at the Clifton border. So it would have been the outskirts of Paterson at the time. Although I have to say, the building really hasn't undergone that many changes. It's pretty identifiable as the old Pinchak Pharmacy. Off of Google Earth, I was able to get these two images, and I thought it was interesting that it started off as a saloon, and then after, from 1919 to 1988, well, Frank had, I think it went through as a pharmacy to 1998, it would go back to being a liquor store for many years, and currently it's a smoke shop. Uh, Not necessarily medicinal, but it still affects your health, these industries. As for Frank growing up, he was a student and did his grammar school at School 9 in Paterson on Getty Ave, and then he would be a graduate of Central High School, class of 1940. And actually, this was one of their largest classes at the time. It was 253 graduates, and one of the biggest careers he had, and would be a lifelong passion, was he was a photographer. In 1937, as the sophomore, he helped create the photography club and would emerge to be the very first president. And you can see Central High School notes. That would be a regular column in the Paterson Morning Call. And it would always indicate, Frank was out there doing, it would have been candid photography, which was pretty new at the time, especially in the 30s and 40s. He would sneak around for the Tatler, which was the high school newspaper. And he would normally have a spread of about 20 photographs. And I did like the one when they were talking about the one dance in 38. And it says, "Watch out for Frank Pinchak tonight. He may be at the dance with Old Faithful, his camera." So, he really, I always saw him genetically attached to a camera, and that's also what helped bond the two of us. But what I didn't really know is he was also quite the athlete. And, he was on the second string, I have to say, but he played football when, men were men at the time, and 39 and 40 for Central High School. And I was able to recover one article where he talks about recovering a fumble, when they really romped, the Bergen County rivals. And the photo, more modern, was at his photo show that he had here, and he was bringing out the old Central High School basketball team. To the left of Frank in the photo would be, our former freeholder, Walter Porter. I forget the guy on the right-hand side. If anyone wants to help me with that, I'd greatly appreciate it. But little reunion of the basketball team. And again, his passion for photography. Upon graduating, he was able to get a college deferment before going to World War II. And he went to the Rutgers University College of Pharmacy. Before that, it was the New Jersey College of Pharmacy. And he would be a graduate of the class of 1943, upon which he would end up having to do his military service. But instead of letting, the Army choose where he was going to go, because of his photographic background, he was enticed to go to the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadets, where he would become a photo officer. Basically, he was later, assigned to the, 21st Photographic Reconnaissance Squadron. And this is where they would, they would process film. Approximately up to 30,000 feet would be shot, and they would process that over one day to create the aerial bomb maps that would be used during the Second World War. One of the images I found of Frank in 1945 was the head officer, and he was stationed stateside for quite a while, where he did offer training for B-17 pilots and how to read the maps, how to also take care of the cameras. And this is some of the reconnaissance work of the 21st. He arrived towards the end of the war, and even though the war had ended, he was still stationed there in China, where they were still doing reconnaissance missions for, possible future use. So he was acting in a spy plane capacity. As for Frank, his terms of service with the 21st would take him to India, Burma, and China before returning home. He did have, some personal photos, and we have quite a bit of them, B-17s. I always like these one little set that he took in El Paso, Texas, at Biggs Field of Morty Meth, who was a graduate of Yale University. And I think they were all graduates of Yale for the engineering from the aviation school. And he would later, be a flight engineer on the B-29 bomber. Of all the photos that Frank always showed, however, one of his favorite from the war period was this young smiling girl from Hangzhou, China. And every time he would show it, he'd always say, "I wonder where she is now. I wonder what happened to her." And this photo is also exhibited at the museum and is in our collections as well. But I always remember it was one of Frank's favorite shots. And it also gave you an indication of the type of person he was, that he could elicit this type of response out of, children and everyone else. Again, a tribute to his personality. Of course, after the war in 45, 46, he returns to Paterson. Paterson's a bustling town. Our population has grown by 4,000 or 5,000, so now we're over 140,000 in town. And our industries are changing again. Wright's Aeronautical is about to leave, but other things are coming in smaller. Frank, in 1946, passes his pharmacist test, and he goes to work in the family business. He did take this photo of Morris Pinchak's pharmacy, that's his dad, of course, at 1134 Main Street while he was on leave as Lieutenant Frank Pinchak. That was his official rating when he left the war. And he would return to come to work here. Interesting enough, Frank's father, Morris, who was an immigrant born in Russia, came here when he was 6 or 7 years old. He served as a pharmacist. He graduated from the College of Pharmacy, as it was in Newark at the time, in 1917, and then was shipped abroad to France during World War I. And the highlighted areas is the region where he would serve in the 347th Field Hospital, and this is the 208th Base Hospital in France at the time. So, was both served in the war. And the real big deal at the time was it was prohibition. And Frank would bring a couple of these prescription, later would bring us a book, which we have in our collections, about, the recording of the sales of intoxicating liquors. And this actually started over a conversation with, with the Halstead Act and prohibition, and how, it was illegal to consume alcohol, but uh, the pharmacists were able to get it for medicinal purposes and cutting. And Frank would start saying, he says, there would be a number of speakeasies that started opening up, not only in Paterson and New York. And he said, if you really found out who, would open these speakeasies, it would be the same guy who was funding some of the opening of new pharmacies. So they would get, I'll loan you some money to open up a pharmacy, and then you pay me some money back and you give me some of your whiskey. And that's, but his dad didn't do that. And he was very clear on that. His father did everything above board as Frank. And to be honest, I would have expected nothing else. As a result of these conversations, in 1996, he put on his very first exhibition here. It was only supposed to be for 3 months. It was one of his last years as super active as president of the Passaic County Pharmaceutical Association. And after 3 months, I have to say, it became such a big hit. And I had other curators that would come and say, you can't go anywhere to find this. You need to keep this here. And I thought, yeah, we'll see what we can do. Well, it's still here, as you may know, and you can come view it. Actually, for the love of photography, I found this in his file, and they're pretty extensive, I have to say, that he shared. When he took that photo, actually, he helped do the setup, which would later, one of his main partners of photography, his grandson, Brian Silverstein, who did the setup. And again, him and Frank would travel quite a bit and share quite a few memories. I always walked around with Frank through Paterson with my camera. I think I was more like his bodyguard though at the time. But I just want you to see, this family affair was quite interesting. And as a result of the work and showing me some of the photos, we're able to come up in 2001 where we did, the grandfather grandson photography exhibit. During this time, Frank was pretty much a constant fixture at the museum. And when he learned that the register for a cash register from the old Edmund Pellet Pharmacy was up for sale, and so he managed to get this for us through the pharmacy and donated it. And fortunately, in our photo collections, you can find the old Pellet Pharmacy. This is the way actually the cash register looked when we first went to see it in the basement of the old pharmacy. Cleaned it up, and it's really a treasure for the museum. And that's when we also started finding out about his poster collection and what he had done. We knew about the one poster, to save children, but had no idea that there was a whole business built around this. And in 2008, we did this major exhibition, and he really discussed what he had developed with the professional advancement plan. And it really, the main thing was to produce ethical, advertising and medical health, the latest in technology and health related issues and concerns, and not to emphasize on the actual pharmaceutical manufacturer. Frank was definitely against a lot of the false advertising, especially in the 1950s was the infancy of television. And he really, was working against that because TV at the time wasn't recorded as it is today. It was normally one and done. And remember, TV was live. And you would have a quack come out, an actor portray a doctor who was representing some pharmaceutical that, the manufacturers wanted to get out there and recommend it. And then it would be gone. And Frank was really against that because it's not an actual portrayal, wasn't a real doctor, first of all. And more than anything, you really couldn't hold them liable because once it was aired and done, it was gone. So he thought the best way really were the magazines and newspapers where you could hold them to their feet to the fire because now it's in print for everyone to see. And that's where he came up with the idea that he could print his own advertising pieces. And of course, he talked about a lot of the pharmacies. And the very first thing you see in a pharmacy, just as any other business, is a storefront display. And that's what would entice him. Louis Patmos, that's a pharmacist from the 1905 in our collection. But they always had store windows, just like anyone else. You want to attract business, and they were very colorful, as you see the Dr. Pierce's family medicines. And that's where Frank came up with his very first one was for opium. And he advertised, he's going to have 4 colors. He really concentrated on the art and the message. What was important about the message is it wouldn't be technical, but it would be able to explain it, as he would say, to the layman. So you would understand and get the latest information that was available for your health. And this was really drove him. It wasn't really about making money. He was always clear. He says, these displays would cost $5. Now, $5 sounds cheap today, but actually it was about $50. Again, he incurred all the cost, the shipping, packaging, printing, production, worked with getting the artist to draw up the artwork, did all the approval. He did all the processing. I mean, he really was a one-man band at the time. And again, look at the topics that he's talking about: immunities, immunizations. I mean, these are relative topics today, let alone in 1955 and 56 and 57 through the early 60s, as he would continue to give the latest information. I also think it's interesting. You see the advertisement on the left. This is what would be sent to almost 1,000 pharmacists in 33 states. And this is what they would base on what they were going to get. And then the 4-color posters that actually show up. And normally it'd be every 2 to 4 months that a new poster would show up. Now, today we talk about, I get a lot of these images. Actually, I should clear up all the photos you see here of the pharmacy displays were taken at the Paterson Museum while that exhibition was on display in 2008. Of course, who did all the photography? Frank. And he's given this to the American Institute of the History of Pharmacy. And he donated 40 of the posters and their artwork. And I have their website on the end, so you can actually look at these in a little greater detail and see the topics that he's covering. Of course, today, some of the depictions are what we would look at as stereotypical artwork for the 1950s. not derogatory. And I'm pretty clear on that because Frank was not that. There's nothing, we find today we apologize, I think, a little too much. These are works of art conceived of the day and not meant to offend. I just be clear on that. And again, getting public health information, 1955, he's still the president of the pharmaceutical, so he's working with the health department, and he's really spreading the word. And again, a permanent fixture throughout Paterson and the state at large. And again, safe storing saves lives, echoed again and again. And what I also liked is not only did he have the posters that would be available for the pharmacies, but also he would also produce these cards. You can see you can get like a set of 50 cards for a couple of dollars. So you could send to your, patients or patrons, the latest advertising. Look, I have a new window display. Again, more to get, you have some revenue, but it was really to get the word out. And I have to say that's important. When you look at the three posters, the larger one is roughly 26 by 42 inches, and the smaller ones, the winglets, are 14 by 28. To just give you a size. And then again, the colors are attractive as well as the artwork, and it's simple writing. We still have polio with us, but right now it's only a handful. We're always like this close to solving it. But he would keep giving the latest information. Fluoride in water. Again, our teeth don't rot so much anymore because of the fluorides and other things that they put in our drinking water. This is the beginning of these, public health issues, and to get the pros and cons out. Again, this is before they politicized, medical conditions. You actually had pharmacists and doctors explaining why these things are really good for you, or why do the benefits of this outweigh any, side effects. Now, while he's producing all these things and making this and running a pharmacy was, a full-time operation. He was president of most of the organizations you see here, from the Passaic County Pharmaceutical Society in New Jersey, Passaic County American Cancer Society, Interprofessional Council of Passaic County. That was a group where doctors, lawyers, professional counsel met. For his service above self, as we would call it in Rotary, he was a member of the Kiwanis Club, again, a service club. He was president more than once. Passaic County Mental Health Association. Of course, being part of Rutgers College of Alumni, he was the treasurer for that association. I would lecture quite a few times when he was the post commander of the Alexander Hamilton VFW post 139. Of course, he ran Frank Pinchak and Associates. That was the pharmacy advocate publicity agency that he had, and he was also on the trustee board of the Clifton Memorial Hospital. This is all I could fit on this page, just to give you an idea of the professional affiliations and how active he was while running a full-time business. I guess, Edith had to do a lot of work. Edith, his wife, was running the house while Frank was doing a million other things. I like this as a full setup. You see the photo on the right of the Asiatic flu. Frank would do the setups. He would take the photos. He produced everything, and then work with the printer how they fit it in. And then from there, as the pharmacist, you would cut along the bottom and you would mail it, postage paid back, and sooner or later, shortly after, your poster would arrive. And again, here's the Asiatic flu, one of the early pandemics. And notice, along with the map, he's also tracing its footsteps of how it spread. Again, and the effectiveness of how vaccines really stop pandemics. Again, this is a pretty timely topic, today, let alone how it was in 1957. And again, he tied in just about everything. Drugs used in scriptures. A lot of people went to church and you would hear certain, mandrake, saffron, and he would talk about, what were the uses today in pharmacies and your medicines. And again, just trying to get education. These are really great, and they're really beautiful works of art. I would just say suitable for framing alone. I mean, it depicts a period in American history that, the graphics and the artwork are simple, and the messaging is simple and effective. In 1958, he's president of the New Jersey Pharmaceutical Association, and here he is at Rutgers, and they're learning about the spread of viruses, and, there's a little demonstration going on. Also during this time, while he was president of the State Pharmacy Association, he started pushing for poison control centers. he had appointed I think his name was Lou Bowser. That's right. He was from East Orange, another pharmacist, and he pushed him to help set up these. So they would be 24 hours in emergency rooms. So if a child ingested something or someone accidentally poisoned themselves, there would be a center that would have special technology and would be able to, remedy their condition. Today, that is morphed into New Jersey Poison Control Center, again, which is managed under Rutgers University, his alma mater. And this is it today. And their messaging is still the same, although their name has gotten a little bit longer. As you can see, they're officially the New Jersey Poison Information and Education System. But again, 24-hour, 7 hotline active. And Frank is really the beginning of where this all started, or, helped promote it. And, I just wanted to finish with a couple of more of his posters that he would, show talking about compounding, how, they really made the medicines in the pharmacy. And again, this is what the average public really learned. They didn't get any health information anywhere else at the time. As I said, your first line of defense for your health was talking to your pharmacist. The neighborhood pharmacist was an important part of our lives. Again, once again, taking the artwork and the messaging, and he was just really trying to establish a professional standard and not something that would be greedy that the manufacturers of pharmaceuticals are trying to push. I don't have to talk about big pharma and things of that today. We know what medicines cost. In the early days of the World Health Organization, they were tackling malaria at the time. And Frank had developed a poster, and it did get the recognition of the UN, and they wrote him right away to thank him for, including them in his professional advancement plan for pharmacists. And they even asked, would you please, when you get the chance, send us the name of all the pharmacies that are showing this display, because we want to send them a thank you as well for sharing our message and, talking about the effectiveness of the World Health Organization, which again, we have to this day. Very important in spreading, not only information, but bringing healthcare to the world. Polio gets its, annual updates from time to time. Again, I just can't think of all the hours he would put in working in a pharmacy from morning to night, ordering, keeping that. Of course, I know he had assistants, but then he's also developing this whole program, traveling the state, going to other meetings, but being the president of meetings. Again, I think I do a lot. I'll never talk again after learning everything that Frank used to do. And again, his topics weren't always healthcare, research. He just kept the conversation going. And more importantly, once these were over, I saw one of his notes. He would say, once you're done and the next display comes, you should share this with either the community center, the town hall, your local church, to keep these messages out. Don't just, put them away or throw them away. Share them with another institution as your next one comes in. Again, the main thing to educate the public on, health safety and how things work, your doctor's choice, explaining things that, today a doctor doesn't explain anything. Here's your prescription, we write and in and out. It was a time when they really made a connection and they really cared. Frank really cared about your health. That's all I can say. And mental illness, over the last few years, it's really been an important issue in worldwide as well as the US. Frank was tackling it in 1961 when no one was talking about it. And the importance that, this is one of our number one problems. This is a health related issue. So, very far seeing, I couldn't believe all that he accomplished through his, professional advancement plan. And again, he had over 1,000 pharmacies, tied into this, and they were all interested in, benefiting the public and getting their knowledge up. And aspirin, which started it all, actually would return more than once in his ad campaigns. And again, keep medicines out of reach of children, because aspirins would look like candy, easy to ingest. Actually, some of the modifications that would be done also is in quantity, especially of aspirin, where initially you could get them anywhere from 50 to 100 in a bottle. That would make an overall reduction to 36 or 30. And the reason behind that was there was no way for a child should overdose by ingesting only 30 or so. If you had 100, it could cause death. So that was another big change that would, come out from his advocacy as well as these poster pieces. Yeah, modern technology, talking about viruses, educating the public. And again, the artwork's attractive that it would draw you in, and there's just enough text, and it makes enough sense that everyone could digest this and understand what it's all about. 1962, everything I mentioned, all those things he's part on, I out of the blue, I find out that he helped bring Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf the very first time it would run on Broadway. There were 25 investors. Frank and Dr. Felix Milford from Paterson both invested in this film, invested in the play, which later became a famous. You may have seen the film, of course, with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. They took a risk. They figured they were going to lose their shirts because it took over 175,000 usually to bring a play to production. They did it on a shoestring budget of 45,000, and it became an instant hit. It would run over for 2 years through about mid of 1964, and as you can see, it had a total of 664 performances. Frank never mentioned this. It's like out of the blue, here he is supporting Broadway. And of course, other topics that we still have to this day, narcotic addiction, drug addiction, nothing new. We've been talking about this since the 50s, 60s. We had a war on drugs, which wasn't successful. But, again, this is an illness. And Frank tried to tackle it. And these posters alive are just as effective today as they were back then. And of course, advertising didn't stop there. Of course, advertising of the pharmacy. And I do like, again, just for the public information end of it, you see the little sticker there for emergencies when what's the top billing? Fire, police, poison center for Paterson. And, you would have to write in your own doctor's number. And of course, who's your local pharmacist that would have sent this to you. But something to remember, you may toss away the calling card that he sent, but you could utilize the important phone numbers. Always thinking ahead. And, I guess once the children were all grown, Edith has a much greater presence in the pharmacy. I'm sure she always did, to be honest. But you can see how the pharmacy facade changed, but it's still in the old 1134. And in 1977, actually, Edith joins the professionals of being, one who could officially fit nation recognized certification for women for, after mastectomies for breast prosthetics. One of the things they would do is other supports for limbs and all. And then going back to that poster, it finally really gets its recognition in 1989. And I met Frank shortly after this when the Smithsonian accepted it and really acknowledges it as one of the very first child safety posters, let alone as a national campaign. And as I said, that phrasing went across the country. And that's really, if Frank was known for anything, if the one thing it would be, trying to keep our children safe and educating us. Today, this is the way the exhibit looks. It's about 2005. Better in color, I think. Frank started also continuing donating. Edith and Frank standing there. The book that they're giving us, that's the way they used to record prescriptions. Today, we would have a filing cabinet. Now everything's digital, so it'd just be on a database. But initially, they would just take the prescriptions and they would paste them into a book, like a scrapbook, and bang. And we have a couple of those. Again, thanks to Frank, he would keep a constant eye out for us. And you'll notice some in in the middle column where the cabinet is. You see some of the mortar and pestles. There's some of the show globes. If you really looked at some of the old advertisements that would go to the pharmacist, these are the props he would use, and we still have them on display today. In 2010, part of our display, as well as I got Frank to join the Middlesex County Museum, did a special exhibit called The Nurse, Call the Doctor, Call the Nurse. And I had Frank do a lecture, as well as he loaned quite a few of the items that were at the museum. This is him at the Cornelius Low House, which is right next to Rutgers University in New Brunswick, right next to the football field. So it was still close to his alma mater. This is Katie, the curator at the time in 2010. Very hard to get Frank animated. I have to always sneak a shot. He always liked to look good. As you can see, he always dressed impeccably. But to try and get an emotional response, I'd have to take a quick shot without him noticing. Otherwise, if he thought you were looking at him or going to take his photo, he'd always pose. And this is one of the lectures that, he would provide. And I have to say, it was well attended. I worked the slides that day. One of my favorite grab shots. It's not really a formal portrait. Actually, Frank was waiting. He was either for high school or college students, and he was going to do a whole thing on medicines. I think it was for a nursing class. Anyway, while he was waiting, I was doing a tour with the, I think, third or fourth graders. One of the fourth graders approached one of the boys and said, "Excuse me, sir, are you a pirate?" And Frank looked over and said, "Yes, I am." The word spread like wildfire. All the kids, "There's a pirate here. There's a pirate here." And I lost my tour of like 33 kids. They all went to Frank, and Frank told them his adventures of India, China, as Frank the good pirate. And I was entertained over the years, I have to say. Anytime Frank was, going to a community event or doing a lecture, or he was passing through, he'd stop at the museum and give me a story, whether it was about pharmacy, history, growing up, his latest photographic exploits. You see this little contact sheet I hear. He had purchased a camera from 1903 and thought it's still got to work. He took some photos. He gave them to us just to show, always adventurous, always learning, and always ready to tell, a story and share something important. And I have to say, for an older fella, he never really repeated anything. Every time he sat in my chair, it would be a different story. Frank over various businesses. You can see he's changing here. Different story, different looking Frank, getting a little older. But the one thing that is pretty constant is that gray top coat, and always had style, Frank. This is one of the last photos I actually took of Frank after we had dinner with with our wives at Mario's in Clifton, as well as many of the times we would spend together at the Rotary. And that's pretty much what I've learned about Frank. And I know there's a lot more. I think we could write a book, and I do mean we, because I know some of the families there, and I probably would want to reach out to you for some more photos. Yeah, and this is National Pharmacy Week, so it's the perfect week, and Frank participated in that quite a bit over the years. And if you're looking for the poster collection, you may not be able to write it down right now. Again, once this is on video, you'll be able to slow it down. However, if you just type in your search engine, the Frank Pinchak poster collection, the very first thing will show up, and you can see about 35 to 40 of these posters. It'll take a little bit more detail and time to review them. And what this really is just a thank you to Frank. I was talking to Gail, his daughter, yesterday, and I just realized how much I really miss my friend Frank. We had a wonderful time together, and because of the gifts he's given to the museum, I see him every day when I walk past the pharmacy exhibit. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Jack. So now if anybody has any questions, or as Jack mentioned, we do have several family and friends in the audience. If anybody wants to share a comment with us as well, please feel free to put that in the chat. It looks like we actually have somebody who would like to talk. Jack, are you okay with me opening up
Sure,
the floor?
of
Okay.
course.
All right, Mike, go ahead. If you want to unmute yourself, you can.
Am I on?
Yep, you're on. Hi, Mike.
How you doing, Heather?
Good.
Jack, I just want you to know I used to work for Frank.
Okay, nice.
1970 through the late 70s, I was his clerk, one of his clerks at the drugstore. And I'm not sure if he put this in his collection or not, but one of the photos that he took was at Shea Stadium. He was invited to sit on the bench of the New York Jets, and he had a beautiful picture of Joe Namath.
No, I haven't seen that.
You haven't seen that?
No.
He was so proud of that. And he had someone took a picture of him also on the bench, but that was something he pinned up in the back room, and anyone who would come back there, he would just extol upon it. He was so happy to have that.
Never shared that one with us. No, thank you. Yeah, no, first time I heard of this. I didn't know he met Broadway Joe.
He did. He did.
How was it working for him?
Interesting. We had good times. We had some not so good times, but overall, he was a really nice fella. I wouldn't have kept going back there when he needed help if I didn't feel a lot of respect for the man and his family. I know Edith pretty well also. And I guess I worked for him on and off to close to 1980.
Okay.
And I enjoyed just about every moment there. During the break-in phase, my early days, of course, things get a little rough till you really get to know each other. But once we got on the same page, God, it was great. I remember one time, I don't mean to hold up anybody else who wants to talk, but during the winter, I used to wash the front windows with a combination of water and alcohol so the water wouldn't freeze. And one day his son, Frank Jr., came by, saw me washing the windows. He said, how long are you going to be doing that? And I told him, until he gives me my freedom. So we were able to joke around, had a nice time, and I realized he became the official photographer for the museum. I was very happy and proud to hear that. Do miss him after all these years, but I'm glad he does have that legacy in Paterson that all of us can be proud of.
And all the lives he saved, you know, he never really thought about it, but you know, that information that he got out really saved thousands of children's lives.
You didn't realize it at the time. It was just what was going on.
Yeah. He did what was necessary, you know.
I think he did more. We
Yeah.
just didn't realize it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike.
Anyone else, Heather?
It doesn't look like we have any other comments or questions at the moment. So as I mentioned earlier, this video will be put up on the, oh, we do have a comment. This video will go up on the museum's YouTube channel. Right. Okay. Go ahead, Jeffrey, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, this is his daughter, Gail.
Oh, hi, Gail.
Hi. I just want to thank everyone for putting this film together. I just found out about this yesterday, and I'm amazed at what a fabulous job that you did, and I can't thank you enough. Obviously, I cried during most of it. So you would have made him proud.
Oh, thank you, Gail. I was nervous when the family's tuning in. You know him better than me.
But it was great, and he did do everything, and I just took it for granted, I think. But I do remember getting the polio vaccine and waiting in line when he gave everybody a sugar cube. I was young enough to remember that. And he did have a lot of drugstore stories. So, and I know everyone who worked for him worked pretty hard. But you know, he had a great store and a lot of history, and you, I think, really recaptured it. So thank you.
I figured he was a tough taskmaster, because even when we would set up or do anything here, if it did not meet his approval or we didn't do it exactly the way he wanted, he let you know in no uncertain terms. But not mean, but it's like he almost made you feel bad that you didn't do it right the first time, you know?
Well, no, he was a perfectionist, but it was okay the way he did it. He did it fine with me growing up, so I have no complaints.
Nice.
Well, thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing your dad with us.
All right, our only other comment it looks like we have so far is from Anna, who just said that this was a very informative webinar. Thank you, Jack. And that she had looked up Frank but hadn't found a lot of information, but after your presentation, she feels that he's definitely a cornerstone of Paterson. So that's lovely.
I say anyone who has access to newspapers.com and you got a lot of time on your hands, just put his name in. You'll have your summer and winter reading taken care of.
And you've been working on this presentation for quite a while, Jack, right?
Yeah. And I left out a lot. It's like, I figured we don't need an hour conversation. We could have used an hour and a half, actually.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. As I mentioned, I will be sending out an email to all of you with a link when this is up on the museum's YouTube channel, and then you can feel free to either watch it again at your leisure or share it with others who missed out today. And if you're interested in signing up for our next program on November 20th, which is going to be Pearl Mania, the Paterson Gem Rush of 1857, you can either email me now and I'll get you on the list, or just wait to hear from us. We will send you an email when that Zoom is all set up so you can register again for that as well. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you very much, Jack, for all your hard work on this presentation.
Thank you, Heather, for managing this.
So, so thank you everyone for tuning in, and I hope everybody has a lovely rest of their day.
Thank you.